Welcome everybody. This is a slightly different kind of video that you guys will be watching, and probably after the planned stream that will be coming out, well, as you watch this, maybe yesterday. Basically, I am sitting down and recording my ladder predictor right now. Basically, in the background, you'll see all around me the current ladder as it stands, which pains me that West Coast is in third, but as we saw on Reddit, and for those of you that do not follow Reddit, yesterday there was a post that revealed the second position curse. In fact, for every single position that a team has held this year, second position has lost the most amount of games all year. They've only won on 4 occasions, so if anyone has been in second place throughout the entire year, they've only won in second place on 4 occasions so far. So there is a second place curse at the moment. Now, Brisbane obviously beat that curse last week. No, they didn't beat that curse because Collingwood lost. So Brisbane at the moment sitting in second place. Now, if the curse is to be believed, they will be losing on the weekend to the Hawks. But yes, a slightly different video. Last night, you probably will have joined me with predicting the AFL ladder come the end of the year. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. We've got some music playing. I'm a couple of drinks into the night, and we're going to go sit down and see who is going to finish in what position at the end of the ladder with 5 rounds to go. Let's see how close we can actually get to predicting, the last 5 rounds. So without any further ado, my name is Ryan from AFL Access, and this is my final ladder predictions. This Friday night, it's very interesting. Now, obviously we don't have teams, and teams do change the aspect of the teams that are playing over the weekend and everything, who plays and everything. Based on current form, and especially if I was to do a power rankings right now, Richmond wins against the Pies. The Pies are not traveling very well at all. The Pies they might actually be lucky to finish in the top 8 on current form at the moment. I did say at the start of the year they would finish 5th. This game, I feel, puts them into 5th position, and the Tigers come away with a 30-point win for mine, which changes their percentage, obviously. Next game, Hawthorn versus the Lions. It is an interesting one. The Lions are Hawthorn's bogey team, but Hawthorn are actually coming into a bit of form. They've won their last 3 or 4 games in a row. And Brisbane have won actually their last 5 games in a row, something incredible. It's interesting. I do think the Brisbane Lions come away with a win. They did win last year down there, although I will say that Hawthorn do have a very good record down in Tasmania, obviously. We might actually change this up to Hawthorn only because of the second place curse that we do know of. And I do feel like Brisbane are due a loss. They've been going on a good win streak as of late. I do feel like they are due for a loss. Maybe a decent loss. I'm not sure if this is... Actually, do you know what? This could be a close loss. We'll go 10 points. Carlton versus Adelaide. Carlton are playing absolutely magnificently at the moment. They've won back-to-back wins. 2019 is actually the first year since the expansion clubs came into the competition that every single team in the competition has had back-to-back wins. The last time it was done was in 2010, before Gold Coast entered the competition. That's an interesting statistic, and on the back of that, I do actually feel like Carlton playing at the MCG is going to get up on the struggling Crows. Not by a big margin. 10 to 20 points is what I see. Probably closer to 20 points. So I'm just going to leave that margin at 20 points there. West Coast plays North Melbourne. I do think West Coast probably takes that. They are due a big win. North Melbourne are playing well, but they're slightly teetering away from their form, which Reshaw brought them about. They've had 2 close losses. I do think they're due for a bigger loss. maybe 40-point loss to West Coast. Now, I am obviously biased in that because I'm a West Coast supporter, but that's what I feel will happen. St Kilda versus Melbourne. I feel that the Saints get away with this on a 30-point win. Melbourne are struggling all sorts. They are not playing very well at all. They're going to drop this game to the Saints. Port Adelaide versus GWS. This is actually a very, very interesting contest because GWS have their top 4 finals hopes hanging in the balance. In fact, their finals hopes hangs in the balance. I don't think Port Adelaide are playing particularly well, and I know that GWS is struggling with injuries at the moment, but Port Adelaide are just such an inconsistent team. I do feel like they need a new coach. I don't think Ken Hinkley is going to get the job done. GWS for mine. 20 points sounds about right, actually. I don't think it's going to be anything more than that. Western Bulldogs take on Fremantle. Now, this is actually a really difficult game to tip because I do think Fremantle are struggling a lot at the moment. They are high position, but not by much. Whereas the Bulldogs dropped one that they should have won, and they're coming into some good form over the back end of the year. I do think the Dogs get away with a win. They came up unluckily against the Saints, who just replaced their coach. I think maybe 50-point win here for the Dogs, which will boost their percentage as well, which they desperately need. Sydney versus Geelong. This is an interesting game because Geelong are out of form in so many ways. Sydney have been better in the back half of the year, but they've been struggling the last few weeks. They haven't won a game for a few weeks. I do see them getting up over Geelong actually, but not by big margins. It's going to be a close margin, under 10 points I see it being. But Geelong are struggling. They've lost 3 of their last 5 games since the bye, and that does not bode well for them at all. It could be a mid-season slump for them, but I see it as tougher problems than that, to be perfectly honest. I see them dropping this game, unfortunately. Gold Coast take on Essendon. I think Essendon take this game quite comfortably. Gold Coast are struggling quite considerably. This is going to be a 30-point margin for mine. Next round, like I said, I'm not showing you percentages, or at least I hope you don't see percentages. We'll see. Friday night, August 2nd, North Melbourne take on Hawthorn. This is an interesting contest. It's at Marvel Stadium, where I feel like North Melbourne play better than Hawthorn. I do feel like North Melbourne probably take this, but in a close contest. 10 points for mine. The Hawks are coming strong, and this could actually go either way, but I do feel like North Melbourne are probably, they'll be coming off of 3 losses or something like that. I feel like they're probably due a bounce back there. Next up, Essendon take on Port Adelaide at Marvel Stadium. This is an interesting contest because the Bombers have been playing pretty damn well over the back end of the year. It just feels like they've been much more consistent over the back end of the year. I think they take it, and I feel like Port Adelaide are just going to fall away in the back end of the year. GWS takes on the Swans. It's GWS for me. Probably about 30 points, I feel like. The Dockers take on Geelong. It's hard for me to go past Geelong. I know they're in a form slunt, but it's hard for me to go past them. I feel like the Dockers are falling away for the back end of the year. It's going to be a 40-point win to Geelong, which is only going to boost their already impressive percentage. Melbourne takes on Richmond. This is an easy Richmond win for me. Actually, this is going to be a big Richmond win. 60 points, 10-goal win for me. Adelaide takes on St Kilda at home. I think Adelaide can win at home against the Saints, although the Saints will be resurgent with a new coach in Brett Ratton, who I think will stay with the Saints. But Adelaide are needing a big win to stay in the 8. 30 points for mine. They get the job done. Collingwood take on Gold Coast. This is a pretty easy, probably a big win. 60 points for Collingwood as they get players back. Carlton take on West Coast. I do think that West Coast are probably too strong a team there. Although they are sitting second place there, they may fall to the second place curse. The Brisbane Lions take on the Dogs at the Gabba. It's a good 30-point win for me. Yeah, probably. Sounds about right. The Dogs are playing well enough to not get completely blown out of the water, but Brisbane are playing pretty well to at least put a margin on them. Alrighty, next game. GWS take on Hawthorn. Ooh, this is an interesting one. The Giants don't play as well in Canberra, especially this year. They haven't played as well. I actually think maybe GWS drop this game to Hawthorn. Not by much, between 10 and 20 points. I'll leave the margin at 20 points there. Demons take on Collingwood. I'm sorry, Demons, you're just not going to be able to get this at all. It's going to be a 30-point margin. Port Adelaide take on the Sydney Swans. Port Adelaide for me. The Lions take on Gold Coast. This is an interesting contest, but still the Lions for mine. Ooh, this is an interesting one. The Bombers take on the Western Bulldogs. What could happen there? The Bulldogs, I feel like they're not a bad team. They've been playing reasonably well this year. The Bombers are hitting some pretty good form so far in the back end of the year. And if they are to carry that through, I feel like this is a game that they would drop though. The Dogs have a lot more to play for, trying to still retain their position to be able to get to the 8. And the Bombers are probably sitting a bit comfortable after a few wins here. I think that this is one that they drop in order to revamp them to make sure that they make the 8. I feel like they drop this. And if they do drop it, it's going to be a big loss. 40 points, I think. Geelong take on North Melbourne. Geelong for mine. St Kilda take on the Dockers. I don't know. It's the Saints for me. The Dockers' injuries are just too big. The Saints will be still playing pretty well after, with a new coach. I feel like the toll of the season for the Dockers is just insurmountable at this point, and I feel like their morale is probably going to start dropping away in these last 5 games. Sorry, Justin. Richmond take on Carlton. This is an interesting game because at the start of the year, Richmond only just beat Carlton, really. Like, when you think about it, if you take out the last 10 minutes of that game, Carlton were in front in the last 10 minutes of the game, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. So Carlton have been playing a lot better, but so have Richmond. Richmond for mine, but it's going to be a close game. This is an interesting matchup. West Coast takes on Adelaide at Optus Stadium. At Optus, I have to side with West Coast, but not by a big margin. Again, 10 to 20 points is all I see it being. If this was played at Adelaide, I'd probably go with Adelaide. Melbourne take on Sydney. This is an interesting one. If Buddy is back, although I think that they should ice Buddy for the rest of the year. If Buddy's back, then the Swans win. But I actually think Melbourne get up over the Swans in this one. In a 20-point margin. I'm comfortable with a 20-point margin there. Carlton take on St Kilda. I'm comfortable with Carlton winning this game. Brisbane Lions take on Geelong at the Gabba. At the Gabba, the Brisbane Lions take this by 30 points. If this was played at GMHBH, whatever your name is, Geelong, if this was played down at Cardinia, what is their stadium name, honestly? Adelaide take on Collingwood. Ooh. I'm going to need a drink to sort this one out. It didn't sort out the problem, guys. See, the thing is, Adelaide are an inconsistent side. They can play good, or they can play pretty poorly. In saying that, Collingwood have been pretty poor for about 10 weeks now. They've been scraping over the line against some sides. When in doubt, go with the home side. I have to go with the home side here in Adelaide. North Melbourne take on Port Adelaide. I feel like North Melbourne are just playing much better than Port Adelaide. This is going to be 30-point margin. I'll go with a 30-point margin. I'm happy with that. Fremantle take on the Bombers. Okay, now if Fremantle have any chance at all of playing any decent football in the back end of the year, it's going to be against the Bombers. But the Bombers play well. at Optus Stadium. We saw that last year when they completely blitzed the Premiership West Coast side. If I'm going to go on form and injuries and all that kind of stuff though, I have to go with the Bombers, not Fremantle. Richmond against West Coast. This is actually the only game that I see West Coast dropping in the back 5 games. Now, in saying that, West Coast have a very, very good record at the MCG over the last 2 years, and I do see this as also being Richmond's only game that they drop. I either come across as biased here, or I come across, and I feel like Richmond drop one more game for the year, and it's this game, or I feel like West Coast drop one more game for the year, and for the year I mean the home and away season, and it's this game. This is going to be a really close slog, and to be honest, I can see this going either Richmond or West Coast way. I might have to just heads and tails it, to be honest. Heads, West Coast. Tails, Richmond. Heads. For reference, I used the bottle cap of a Pepsi bottle, but it was heads. That's West Coast. I mean, I can't. What the? What the? Wait, hang on. No, we're not looking at percentage. No, I'm not even looking at it. That's surprising. I don't actually want them to finish first. I'd rather them finish second. GWS take on the Bulldogs. GWS for mine. I think that they'll probably come away with a bigger win. 50-point margin. I feel like that's reasonable. And Hawthorn take on Gold Coast. Gold Coast a weekend. Yeah, 40 to 50-point margin I feel is reasonable in that circumstance. Gold Coast are leaking points like something chronic. Round 22, Justin and I will be doing another watch party. That Fremantle versus Essendon game we'll be watching live with you guys, so take note on that. And then this round, my brother and I will be going to the West Coast Hawthorn game up at Optus Stadium and vlogging that live for you. Well, not live, but we'll be vlogging it so you guys can see our experience as Hawthorn, as is predicted, this is what we hoped would happen, would be pushing for the top 8, but I see them losing that game, so I'm just going to lock that in. Lock that in, Eddie, by about 30 points. Anyway, North Melbourne take on Melbourne. I think North Melbourne takes away the chocolates on that one with 30-point win. They missed the 8, but that's a pretty handsome return considering the start of their year. Let's be perfectly honest. The MCG, Brisbane don't play the MCG very well at all. I actually see this as being a pretty big loss for them. A loss so great that it actually brings them down to 4th. That's surprising. I was not expecting that. Gold Coast take on GWS. This is a win for GWS. This is going to be a big win, actually. Port Adelaide will probably beat... this is going to be a round of big defeats, isn't it? Okay, 40 points there. Yeah, that's reasonable. Geelong. Yeah, they probably come away with a big win. Unfortunately for Carlton, I feel like Carlton are playing better than to finish the year off on a 50-point loss, but if Geelong want to have a chance in the finals, they need to finish the year off pretty strongly. And they've been coming away with some losses. They need to come away with a win there, and a big win, just to show people that they're okay. Mars, well, that's the Dogs' home ground. And I do feel like the Dogs are probably playing better football than Adelaide. It's going to be a Dogs win. But it's by how much here? How much do Adelaide have to lose by for the Hawks to get in, even if the Hawks lose? 70 to 80 points. I don't think the Dogs have it in them to win by that margin. Even as biased as I could possibly be to let the Hawthorn into the top 8 for my brother, I can't see an 80-point loss or win against Adelaide being the case. Collingwood take on the Bombers. This is a very interesting contest. I'd probably have to go with Collingwood. I don't think it's going to be a big margin, maybe 30 points. They finished 6th. Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Sydney Swans take on St Kilda at the SCG. I think the Swans finished the year on a win. Not a big win, 20-point margin. I'm happy with that. So with that in mind, let us have a look at the final standing ladder. Oh, hey! With the power of magic, I've moved over to the other side of the screen. Who'd have thought? I suppose I might be biased there. I didn't think Geelong was capable of losing top spot, but in saying that, the Richmond West Coast game is purely dependent. I mean, I decided that by pure chance. If Richmond win, then Geelong stay on top and West Coast come down to second position. So that Richmond West Coast game is purely where the final top four rests. Even if Richmond beats West Coast based on the percentages there, then Richmond stay third, West Coast finish second. So I think that game is pivotal in shaping the top four. In saying that though, as we see here, West Coast in first place, 117.6%. That's a far cry better than what it was, say, 8 rounds into the season, where it was something like 98% or something like that. Geelong come down to second position, but those two could be flipped by the end of the year. Who knows? Depends on the West Coast Richmond game. I think Richmond come up into the top four, which 2 weeks ago I was saying was not going to happen. I felt like GWS would actually stay in the top four, but their form is dwindling a little bit there as well. The Brisbane Lions actually finish in the top four. I said at the start of the year that they would be 7th position, and a lot of comments that were coming through at the start of the year were, nah, you're dreaming, mate, you're dreaming. But I wasn't that far off the prediction, to be perfectly honest. GWS etch out Collingwood in 5th position with the second strongest percentage in the league, which is actually quite surprising. That just means that they started the year off super strong. And Collingwood come down to 6th place. I don't think they're a premiership threat after seeing that. Their run home is actually pretty tough for them. And even if it's not, I still feel like they drop out of the top four, which a lot of people gave me a lot of flack at the start of the year when I said that Collingwood would finish 5th. And I hadn't even looked at the draw at that time. That's just where I felt they would finish. And I mean, I couldn't even say that I was being unreasonable to them in that 5-week stretch that I just went through. So we'll see. I'm very interested to see, because at this point in time, you guys haven't decided what the final ladder will be through the stream. Essendon make finals and Adelaide make finals. Adelaide actually get the final. They're 2 games behind Essendon, which is surprising. Hawthorn just miss out on percentage, as do the Western Bulldogs. Their percentage as of right now is at 95%. It is too far back to catch up to the rest of the top 8, and they have to get there on wins alone, which clearly by this they don't. Port Adelaide miss out. North Melbourne also miss out a game out of the 8 as well as percentage, but it was a strong comeback by North Melbourne considering the start of their year. To even get to 10 wins, that's a far cry lot better than what it was looking to be 5 rounds into the season. St Kilda finish off okay considering their list, even though they're now without a coach, although I think Brett Ratton probably stays. Sydney need to reload and launch back up for next year. Their percentage is quite healthy at 93.9%. That's actually quite surprising how high it is considering their amount of wins that they've got. It means that they've had a decent season, just inconsistent at times. Fremantle with 8 wins. That's actually very interesting because that would be 3 years in a row they've had 8 wins. I don't think that's probably happened in the AFL era before. Carlton come up to 7 wins. I said at the start of the year that they would finish with 8. Now, considering the start of their year to finish with 7, that is damn good. And with a percentage of 86.5, I think that's actually better than what Brisbane's was last year with 5 wins. So who knows? Carlton next year could be in the top 4. Melbourne's season completely falls off the rails. They were premiership favourites for pretty much everybody except for Daniel, apparently. They were my premiership favourites. They were a lot of media personality favourites coming into the year, and they finish in 17th spot. Now, 17th spot with 6 wins, like that's actually unheard of, to be 6 wins and in second last, I think. So, like, it's a bad year for Melbourne considering their expectations, but considering second spot is 6 wins, that means that the rest of the competition had a pretty good year when all things considered. Unfortunately, to round out the ladder is Gold Coast in last position. I do think that next year they'll reload pretty well. They've had a lot of injuries to a lot of key players this year. Gold Coast, I do feel will start climbing the ladder, and I do think that they actually make finals in 3 years. You heard it here first. I'm pretty happy tonight. If you agree with my top 8 and specifically my ladder, then let me know in the comments below. If yours is different, then also let me know in the comments below, guys. Don't forget to join our Discord. The link will be in the description below. It is a huge amount of fun. And make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to receive notifications when we come out with new content, especially Footy Rivals and the watch party coming up. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, this has been your AFL Access. Bye.